Safeguard Our Flank. Part 13. The Londoners. The Kensingtons were the first of the 4th London Brigade to report their mobilisation complete, declares Sergeant Bailey in his half of the book, The Kensingtons. Battalion orders were received to prepare for foreign service on the 28th of October 1914. On Sunday, the 3rd of November, the battalion followed the band to Watford Station to board train for Southampton to take up station on their steamship SS Matheran, bound for Havre and Rest Camp No. 1. Even before mobilisation, they were a well-trained formation. The previous 4 months' experience, marching from Watford, sailing to France, manning a front-line trench and undergoing all the rigours of trench life had made them incomparable veterans. Its 4 companies had seen a lot of action, thankfully losing few men, but also maintaining a high proportion of their original pre-war volunteers. The men were in the main well-educated city men, previously working as managers and office workers in London's business sector. On the 18th of November, one half of the battalion found itself occupying a trench southeast of Feu-Quessant. From the 21st, their duties were shared with the other half of the 3-day rota system. The Kensingtons' first battle was Neuve Chapelle, where they acted as Brigade Reserve. From the middle of March 1915, the battalion were to share all the hazards of regular formations, for their baptism of fire was now over. Each of the battalions prided themselves on their local town content, representing a particular part of London. Conan Doyle has Sherlock Holmes characterise a stockbroker's clerk who appears in one of his cases as representative of the type found in one of our better London volunteer regiments. Each of the battalions prided themselves on their corps that represented a particular part of London, and within the London division were brigades. From each brigade comprised a number of battalions, overseas headquarters, another in training, and each battalion had 4 rifle companies made up of 3 platoons comprising a number of squads. These multiples could be increased to 4 or more in times of war, and shed in times of peace. After each battle, the fighting strength of a platoon was made good by stripping away from the headquarters company. To specify exactly the strength of each during an engagement is impossible. Accurate figures can only be found via the diary of each company. These were not always available. Each battalion had a number of other companies in support of the riflemen who were in the front line. These were headquarters staff, transport, armourers, caterers and other specialists, i.e. machine gun, mortar or bomb. Backing up the front-line troops were the reserves, support companies, ammunition parties, signallers, stretcher bearers and pioneers. When the Kensington Battalion took over the trenches at Hebburton from the 8th Middlesex on the 21st of May, communication trenches had been established. The ruins of the village provided some cover from German snipers in Gomcourt Park, although it was in the range of German artillery in their rear. Battalion headquarters was established in the mill's cellars, which fortunately had its entrances well sandbagged to prevent the occasional enemy fire. It was obvious to all the men that an attack was imminent. The stacks of supply dumps, additional ammunition and bombs, new pipelines and railway tracks, roadworks and gun pits were everywhere. The weather was beautiful, allowing the preparation to be made in near-perfect conditions. However, that was not to last. A draft of 200 men went some way towards making up for the men lost, and behind the village dumps were being laid out for ammunition and shells, tapes laid for other supplies. By this time the battalion, in company with the rest of the brigade, knew that a trench was to be dug in no man's land. The digging parties were all supplied with the necessary picks, shovels and sandbags. At night, parties went out and cut lanes in the British wire in preparation and laid tapes as markers. The British front line, prior to the construction of the new trench, was initialled as Sectors Y. There was 50, 49, 48, 47 and W 50, 49, 48. It then crossed the D27 road. Lieutenant General Snow gave the task of constructing a new British front-line trench to Brigadier General Locke. It was to be dug halfway between the British and German lines and identified with the letter S instead of R. This new front line was provided with communication trenches that linked to the rear areas, the village of Hebburton and brigade headquarters in the mill. The 56th Division, 3 brigades totalling 3,000 men, were ordered to construct this new forward line in no man's land, 400 yards in front of the existing trench. This was to extend for almost 2 miles, the work being done on the nights of the 25th and 26th of May, and identified with the omission of the old front line's identification letter S. The Germans observed all this activity but did nothing about it, not appreciating its significance, keeping well down behind their trench wall, sheltering from a huge barrage which was partly meant to achieve a distraction from what was going on. This new advanced trench was dug with little loss of life, which was a fine achievement. Volunteers were called for within the 167th to man the trench that night. The following night the trench was deepened and firing steps cut in. This action saved many lives. This very simple expediency, like linking shell holes or pushing out of sap, allowed attacking troops to get closer to the enemy front line. It was a pity that the new trench on the 46th front was so inadequate. This trench building was no mere casual arrangement, but a well-organised undertaking. The task was given artillery support, if necessary, and a number of ruses to confuse the Germans whilst the work was underway. Its construction went a long way towards the successful penetration of the German front line on the day of the battle. The days during and preceding the attack, the 167th Brigade stood guard in this trench, staying until relieved by the 168th and the 169th Brigades before the attack on the 1st of July. The 46th Division also made an effort to do the same, only their trench did not have the same support. Their poor attempt was undermined by 2 days of incessant rain which half filled the trench. These new advanced trenches were dug with little loss of life, which was a fine achievement. The following night the trenches were deepened and firing steps cut in. The German front line trench was sectioned off and given a code name beginning with the letter F, and the connecting trenches with the letter E. Behind this forward trench was the German second line, also identified with the letter F for Fable, and a new third rear trench close to the D6 main road. The British artillery behind Hebburton and Fonquevillers started registering their guns on the 24th of June, the object being to sever and flatten the wire whilst taking out the plotted German strongpoints. As the day of the battle approached, the bombardment intensified. The Germans meanwhile noted where the guns were firing from, but did nothing about it. Prior to the battle, all the communication trenches were made up trenches until after the initial waves had gone forward. It was then made clear that the previous direction for each communication trench would then be returned to its original task. This order was to lead to a terrible confusion when the wounded were being ferried back and the company runners tried to get through with their orders.